previous peace proposal was actually conducted, and how it was reported in both the news at the time and also in our history books. You are watching reality unfold in front of your eyes in quite a dramatically different way, if not the exact inverse way, than the way it is being presented in the media. Okay? So, obviously Israel's been the obstacle before, but now the framing's a bit different. No, Israel has always been the obstacle. The problem is the attitude shift has occurred very dramatically. Unfortunately for Israel, it's not just coming from, people are not just learning about the stuff from mainstream media. They are now seeing it with their own two eyes, directly from the casualties themselves, from the survivors themselves. This is precisely the reason why, even when the media reports on this stuff in the way that they normally do, most people go, that. Once again, Israel can no longer control the narrative, and the media has to respond to that outside pressure. Something that I've talked about quite frequently off camera with some friends who try to understand why, like, even the mainstream attitude is shifting a little bit against the Israeli direction. And that is because the media does have to still maintain a level of authority and a level of impartiality in order to be able to do propaganda in times of need, when it's desperately needed. If you're so aggressively doing propaganda when most of the people recognize you're doing propaganda, at that point, you're going to lose more and more people to independent media outlets and maybe even charlatans, right? Outside of the sphere of mainstream, just permanent contrarians, anti-vaxxers, hateful people. And that is genuinely damaging to public discourse in general, and it's genuinely damaging to mainstream media in general. So they have to at least maintain a level of impartiality. So that is the reason why they have to respond to all of the unimaginable churn of anti-Israeli sentiment that the public has and the realities that the public sees outside of course, the neat little confines, the neat little bubble that the mainstream media tries to create, where they try to always stop the narrative, always stop the narrative that Israel is doing something wrong. Israel's actually doing wrong things, but they're doing it in a careful manner, but sometimes they're not so careful, yada, yada, yada. They always contextualize the violence from one side. Now, having said that, an analog here can be seen with East Palestine, Ohio, ironically enough. If you guys recall, when the train derailment occurred in East Palestine, Ohio, and this massive cloud erupted, people were genuinely scared. They were filming it. They were talking about it. They were mostly talking about it on TikTok. And then the story became, why the fuck is mainstream media not covering this? Which only forced mainstream media's hand to cover the story. Now, the reason why mainstream media had not covered that story prior is not just because they are obviously interested in protecting profits and corporations and whatnot, but also because, and I told you this at the time, 3 of those derailments to, different severity occur every single day in this country. 3 train derailments a day. Some just as devastating as East Palestine, Ohio, others not as devastating, but they happen all the time. And most people in media know this. So they're like, what? It's just another train derailment. Why the f will we cover it? There's 1,000 of them a year. But they were forced to cover it because everyone was like, what the f is going on? The reason why I'm explaining this example to you is because it is analogous to what's going on with Gaza, okay? The media normally doesn't cover anything that Israel is doing, any of the atrocities that Israel commits on a regular basis with regular frequency. However, this time it became impossible to ignore. This time it became impossible to contextualize. This time there was other social media platforms where people could see with their own 2 eyes exactly the devastation, the death, and the destruction that Israel was dishing out to the Palestinian population. So that's why they are still ultimately going to run as much cover for Israel as physically possible, while trying to also retain a sense of impartiality over it that is needed for them to maintain their authority. These are 2 conflicting, these are 2 different motivations in direct contradiction with one another. If you accurately report on what the f is going on, then you have to call it a genocide. But if you call it a genocide, then you're going against the other reason why you exist, which is to, of course, do the bidding of the American State Department. But if you do the bidding of the American State Department too much, then all of a sudden you've lost your authority, you've lost your credibility with an entire generation. And that is precisely what is happening here. That's why you see desperate calls to whitewash Israel's genocide with a little bit of decent news coverage sandwiched in between. Okay? But the real reason why the real coverage has to happen is so that in times of need, when push comes to shove and they have to literally do the propaganda necessary to correspond to American State Department interests, they have to have a sense of credibility. They have to have people trust mainstream news. When you lose that trust, then no one's going to listen to you when you report on it. The Iraq War was a major change of pace. A lot of the democratization of media that you see, a lot of the independent media that you see now, in that time frame, in the consent being manufactured for the war on terror, which was a $6 trillion project, and the failure of that all created a phenomenal opportunity for independent outlets to basically say, "No, this is bullshit." That also caused a lot of chaos, though. COVID was another moment where people further continued their distrust of mainstream outlets. And I think that we are now living in that universe where we are now living in the ashes of that, where unfortunately for our institutions that want to at least maintain some level of consistent messaging, sometimes that's good, like in COVID. Okay?
Domination.
During COVID,
I'll take 3 objectives on your
about like best
Assault them at your discretion.
and bringing forward scientists and whatnot to speak on health initiatives,
3,
epidemiologists
2,
and the like that was a good
1.
thing. But
Your
people
mission
already
is to secure
mistrusted
the capture
mainstream
zone.
media so much and so dramatically, and there were so many outlets that kept
Friendly's
talking about what the media
capturing
lies
Zone
to
A.
us. Look at the Iraq War. They could just point to that and point to many other instances where
Friendly's
mainstream
going
media
for Zone B.
has been caught
Zone secured.
trying to cultivate a narrative that people already had that inherent mistrust, and they no longer wanted to listen to what
Capture
they were
zone
saying,
contested.
especially in times when they were saying things like you have to stay at home. This, in my opinion, is a
Capture zone
dangerous
secured.
prospect. Okay, it's a dangerous prospect. But if you are wondering why, like, the attitude has changed, even in mainstream outlets, like where they are kind of showing
Hostiles
Israel's
on the scope in Zone
atrocities,
B.
that is the reason. Because they want to desperately get back to a point where you at least have some level of credibility for mainstream media outlets, and you trust them a little bit. Okay, it's forced us to watch mainstream media with a filter, i.e., watch CNN, telling us how they're playing us and what's right and what's wrong. Yes, and it's still very important. I still think that regardless of the consent that mainstream media tries to manufacture, it's still very important for it to exist. It's
Capture zone
incredibly
contested.
important. Who else is going to do the journalism? It's not going to be me. I'm here serving the top of the hour ad break.
This is a
That's my
rough
job. My
But you're
job
a
is not to
pro.
go there
You'll
and
bounce
like
back.
point a camera at people and try to develop a better understanding of what's going on in the world. Anyway, but at the top of the hour, there is a
Friendly's
30-minute ad
going
break.
for Zone B.
And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. System stirs. Thank you for the 7 community gifted subs. This is the only outlet where you can have serious news coverage after a gooning video that is like absolutely devastating. Okay?
Capture zone
Only to have a
contested.
guy named Thick Booty 69420 go, which do you think is more moderate, Islam or Christianity? I know this is off topic. Feel free to ignore while I send this a few times. There's no other place where you can have that interrupt regular news coverage immediately after
Tango
the
dispatch.
3-minute ad break comes and interrupts the regular news
Hostiles on
coverage
the scope
for
in
those
Zone
who are
B.
unsubscribed. New York Times writes, Netanyahu answers Biden's calls for truth by insisting on destruction of Hamas. Now, New York Times wrote this report showing Jabalia, the refugee camp of what remains of Jabalia in northern Gaza, okay? And also saying that the Israeli authorities are saying they're not going to do it because there's also aspects of war cabin. However, 28 minutes ago, Israel, according to Barack Rabin's reporting, confirms the Gaza
Thanks for lighting up the
ceasefire
stove.
deal proposal
Really coming out of the
laid out
woodwork.
by Biden. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his aides are focusing on the aspects of a potential deal that are more favorable to Israel as the Prime Minister faces opposition to the proposal that could threaten the future of his coalition.
Capture zone
You're not
contested.
believing in the reporting that this proposal came from the Israel War Council this week. They said Bibi was on the losing side of the vote, which is why he's trying to kill it. Well, now apparently he's on the side that says yes to the vote. And yes, I do know that there was reporting that came out from, I do believe the reporting that the Israeli War Council was the one who suggested this. Except I also believe that Biden added the ceasefire and permanent end to hostilities aspect to the Israeli War Council.
Capture zone A is at risk.
Program because the Israeli War Council opened the door to maintain
Hostiles on the scope in zone B.
occupation, or at least like stay in Gaza till, according to their own, according to the additional reporting on the matter, stay there until January, until after the election was over. Do you see what I'm saying? But what I do know for a fact,
Friendly
regardless
going
of
for
the
zone B.
palace intrigue, okay, regardless of the palace intrigue, is that what I do know is in some way, shape,
Friendly's
or form,
on B.
Hamas has introduced negotiations processes. In the negotiation processes, Hamas has introduced bills that are either damn near identical to this one or very close to it. You see what I'm saying? That's the
We're
issue.
losing zone
I
A.
do believe that the American government added the ceasefire aspect to this specifically to trap Israel in a bind. I think that they recognize the domestic
Capture zone
pressure
secured.
on Biden's re-election chances, and more importantly than that, I think they recognize the international community's pressure placed upon Israel becoming a pariah state. That is what is going on here. So I do think that they took the Israeli War Cabinet's conditions and basically turned it into the exact same proposal that Hamas had said yes to, if you recall,
Zone compromised.
right in the eve of the Rafah invasion.
Zone
If you
B is
recall,
vulnerable.
Hamas had said yes to a ceasefire proposal that was cut by Qatar and the CIA. Then additional news came out
We're on
saying,
track for mission
the
success.
Egyptian envoys
Keep it up.
actually changed the terms and negotiations of the proposal,
I need a
and that's why
medic.
Hamas said yes
Swapping
to
mags.
it.
Cover
Nobody
me.
knew. I don't believe that. I do
Friendly's on
believe
B.
what happened is that America cut a separate deal with Hamas saying, no, we're gonna get these guys back down. Just say yes to this, and we will cut this ceasefire and
Secure all the zones. This should be familiar
and permanent
territory.
end to the hostility, permanent end to hostilities. Bill, just play ball with us. You are more likely to get reasonable outcomes
Zone A
from
under
us
assault.
and Israel. In this negotiations process, the parties that I trust, if I'm looking at like who I trust the most, I 100%, and people will yell at me for saying this, but I'll openly state this, I trust the Hamas envoys more than I trust the Israeli government.
taking A.
And I trust the American government even more than I trust the Israeli government. I think that the Israeli War Cabinet is in a very desperate
Capture zone
situation
secured.
where there are
Zone
conflicting
contested.
opinions
Zone B
on how to
compromised.
manage the ethnic cleansing and the apartheid, with many, even the moderate voices on the cabinet, saying that they want to continue in some way, shape, or form the eradication of Hamas, which we all know now is basically complete death and destruction of the entire life of the Gazan civilian population. I think that at least for America, there is an additional interest
Allies on
in
B.
maintaining its hegemonic power, maintaining some kind of influence so that they can retain like soft power in the region to a certain degree. So I think that the American government is trying to force through public pressure this way, which it could have done literally a month in, by the way, a month into the siege, when already 5,000 people, 10,000 people had been murdered by
Zone
Israel. They could
contested.
have done this back then and nipped this shit in the bud, which would have, in my opinion, given Israel a better opportunity to
Gathering
continue
intel.
with a more liberal, more tolerant approach to the apartheid. Israel, on the other hand, refused to play ball. American State Department employees that thought, maybe Israel can continue doing this kind of thing because of the prior ways of being able to shut out any kind of communication from the Gaza Strip that doesn't correspond to the pro-Israeli narrative. That was gone, and I
Allies
think
on
they
B.
mismanaged the situation and misjudged how
Hostile
misjudged
suppressed.
how little they would
Zone
get,
secured.
how much pushback they would get.
Zone
Not how little,
contested.
sorry. They misjudged how little people would criticize Israel, or
About
how
to
much
lose
people
beat.
would criticize Israel. Okay? Did you see the new soldier that was captured by Hamas? Israel denied it, but Hamas showed a video of the soldier today. Yes, I saw it, but I can't show it to you, obviously, because he's like pretty dead. He's virtually dead in the video, and he most likely succumbed to
Gathering
his
intel.
injuries after said video. After his
They're on
capture.
B.
Showing
You're
also
about to
videos
win
of
this,
these captured
agent.
soldiers
Stay
is a
focused.
war crime technically. Yeah. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, by the way, the two biggest psychos
got to
in
win,
the
agent.
Netanyahu, not war cabinet, but like the Netanyahu government, are threatening to leave the government if the Biden ceasefire proposal is agreed upon by the Israeli war cabinet. It's just all over the place. Shortly after the Jewish Sabbath ended, Netanyahu's ultranational coalition partners, ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, issued statements attacking the Israeli proposal, which they heard about for the first time in Biden's speech. They said they told Netanyahu if this proposal goes through and turns into a deal, they would leave the coalition and topple the government. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid responded by issuing a statement committing to give Netanyahu a political safety net if needed in order to pass the deal. What are the consequences of them leaving the government? The consequences are major on Benjamin Netanyahu, who fears genuine, prosecution, who was at the precipice of going to jail over corruption and bribery charges. So if the right-wing coalition that Benjamin Netanyahu has put forward in the current government, not just the war cabinet, but the current government, falls apart, then there has to be a re-election. And if that happens, Benjamin Netanyahu now has to go to left-leaning for Israel and centrist parties to be able to create a new government.
Loadout updated.
I know you
Hostiles
know,
hold
but I'm
all
not sure
capture
everyone
zones.
does, that if Bibi
Start
loses
making some
power,
noise,
he would be on
agent.
trial for
Team
corruption almost
capturing
immediately.
zone
He has the
C.
prime minister
Capture zone
immunity at the moment, but
contested.
he wouldn't
Secure those capture
but he would do
zones.
anything to hold on to power at the moment. Yes. The U.S., Egypt, and Qatar issue a joint statement on Saturday calling on both Hamas and Israel to finalize an agreement embodying the principles outlined by President Biden.
Friendly's going for zone B.
Brought the demands of all parties together in a deal that serves multiple interests and will bring immediate relief to both to the long-suffering people of Gaza as well as the long-suffering hostages and their families. Biden administration officials worked
Friendly's
on
capturing zone A.
Friday and Saturday to get statements of support from U.S. allies and Arab countries. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke on the phone with the foreign ministers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Turkey, and Qatar. The Emirati
Capture
foreign
zone
minister
secured.
issued a statement regarding Biden's speech, and the Saudi foreign minister said his country supports any proposal that will end the
Capture
war.
zone A is at
President
risk.
Emmanuel Macron, British Foreign Minister David Cameron, and EU Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell also issued statements in support for Biden's speech. Biden has said in his speech that even if a deal is reached and a ceasefire begins, Israel has a right to defend
contested.
itself and bring those responsible for October 7th to justice and could resume military operations if Hamas fails to fulfill its commitments. To Netanyahu has emphasized in a briefing that accommodated a proposal, Israel reserves the right to resume fighting at any time if Hamas violates its obligations under the deal. Those conditions could include not releasing the number of hostages agreed upon, or if Israel gets the impression that the negotiations in phase 2 of the
going
deal
for
are
B.
fruitless and used by Hamas to buy time. The aide said Israel's conditions for the end of the war have not changed, destroying Hamas' militant wing and the group's ability to govern, the release of all hostages, and ensuring that Hamas can abandon Israel in the future. Hamas's outlines for the condition are not vague. It is a permanent end to hostilities
Zone B compromised.
and a prisoner swap for all the hostages Hamas has, for all the hostages, well, not all, but thousands of many thousands of hostages
Zone
that
compromised.
Israel has in detention. Israel's side, on the other hand, has some
Hostiles on A.
vague qualifiers
Friendlies on
like,
zone C.
we can still turn around and attack for any reason that we see fit. Obviously, if it is left
Missions in jeopardy,
vague
agent.
on the Israeli front and not with clear-cut conditions, this is not a real negotiation or a real ceasefire at all. Having said that, however, the Palestinian envoys did very quickly, almost instantly after the Biden proposal, looked at the proposal, saw that it was obviously nearly identical to the proposals that they had suggested before, the ones that they said yes to in the past, and said,
I'll
this
start
seems
filling
great.
out the mission
Israel, on the
failure
other hand,
report.
has
Get a head
very
start on the
different
bookkeeping.
messages coming out of Israel. Some in the Israeli government said, no, absolutely not. We'll disband the Israeli government. We'll destroy it. Others said, no, we are not stopping
Capture
until
zone
we
secured.
completely eradicate,
Zone C is falling.
completely eradicate Hamas, which, as you know, equals the death and destruction of the entirety of the Gaza Strip. The proposal for the release of hostages allows Israel to
Zone
make sure that all these
contested.
conditions will
Friendlies
be
on
realized
B.
before a permanent ceasefire takes effect, they said, which is basically openly stating that they're going to continue killing people even after they get all the hostages, which is a wild thing to openly recognize and openly admit, especially when the entire world is watching. But you can get to
You're off your
you
game,
get to make
agent.
these statements when you're Israel and you know full well that the media is not going to look at that and go, that's insane that you're saying this. And that if Hamas turns around and says, hey, they're saying they're going to kill us even after the hostage swap is done, then the American government can turn around and the media can turn around and be like, see, Hamas is ruining these proposals. Ultimately, though, I suspect that this will have a similar effect to the Rafah red lines. Maybe I'm being too optimistic about it, but the Rafah red line and the subsequent attacks from Israel caused a lot more animosity against Israel and caused a lot more pressure from the Western world than it did before. So I think that even with this poison pill that Netanyahu is trying to put into this provision, you're right, that is a poison pill. It ultimately feels like America is taking a stance against Israel's very open, declared actions. The proposal says that no later than the 16th day of implementation, indirect negotiations will begin between two parties in order to forge an agreement on the conditions for the implementation of phase 2 of this agreement, a Netanyahu aide said. The White House notified the Israeli Prime Minister's office about Biden's speech about 2 hours in advance. U.S. officials spoke to the Israeli ambassador in Washington, Mike Herzog, and one of Netanyahu's advisors, and described the speech to them in broad terms. The White House also informed Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, another war criminal, not a war crime, Yoav Gallant. The U.S. official said the White House was disappointed by Gantz's initial reaction, but on Saturday, Gantz issued a statement welcoming Biden's speech and calling on Netanyahu to push forward with the hostage deal. So that's the situation at hand. The longer the cessation, the harder it will be for Israel to resume. Western press on the ground in Gaza. UN
Loadout
finding
updated.
visuals of
Your
sexual will
mission
make it
is to
difficult for
secure
Israel
the
to
capture
justify
zones.
bombing again. I agree. Something that Benjamin Netanyahu knows full well, which is why he very quickly stopped the ceasefire that took place for 7 days, if you remember. What? Can I get your insight, specifically the latter portion regarding the optics? Bro, what? I hate when people do this. They'll send a link one time, they get clapped, and then they just like literally keep going, hey man, can I get your insight on this? Can I get your insight on this?
Hello, my name.
Oh my God, dude. I'm not giving you my insight on this, okay? I don't know. I don't care. I don't care what the veteran guy is saying about Israel. I know. He makes a lot of great videos. I know. Okay? No, it's this classic. It's Greg J. Stoker. Anyway, it's interesting because I've seen a twofold reaction to this within the Israeli government. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are very clear about that. Yeah, this obviously means ending the war, but in a different spin I saw from the public channel 11 is that the talks at the end of the first stage supposedly included permanent end to the war on the condition that Hamas military and civil control is completely dismantled. Kind of a split between no, bro, this ain't ours, and no, we offered it, but yeah.
Friendly's going for Zone B.
Trying to put poison
Revealing
pills
enemies.
into the negotiations process.
Capture zone contested.
No reasonable party would agree to for very understandable reasons, and therefore I'm waiting for March, chatters. I think he's on his way. March was 3 months ago. Good one, guys.
Phase, Hamas and Israel would negotiate a permanent end to hostilities. The final phase would include a major reconstruction operation in Gaza with international support. Among those urging Hamas to get on board was Foreign Secretary David Cameron, posting on social media, "Let's seize this moment and bring this conflict to an end." For President Biden, resolving the conflict has become a political imperative ahead of elections in
I'm detecting
5 months'
hostiles on
time.
Zone C.
He's been
Friendlies
losing the
capturing
support
Zone
of
A.
some younger voters and Muslim voters. Both have been vocal in their dissatisfaction at events in
All zones in enemy hands. Take them
Netanyahu
back.
won't agree to the hostage release deal unless it polls well for him. Israeli families say they were told. That's a nutty piece of reporting from NBC News. The Israeli government made a conscious and deliberate decision to sacrifice the hostages of the hostage families forum said. I mean, I'm losing my mind on a way more frequent basis. They just keep yelling at these guys
Zone
and saying that
compromised.
you're a
Allies on
hurdle
B.
against our broader goals of just like doing ethnic cleansing. Just shut the fuck up. Stop ruining the situation. Why he is not banned for supporting terrorists? Who's that? Me? First time chatter. I do not support the Israeli occupying force. Nor do I support the American government.
Zone
So no,
secured.
I am not supporting terrorists. If that's what you mean, I can clarify it for you.
In Gaza. For Palestinians in Gaza, if Hamas agrees to this deal, it will be the start of a long road to rebuild some semblance of the lives they once had. Vincent McAviney, BBC News.
With me now is Mohammed Taha from BBC Arabic to discuss this further. Mohammed, we've had proposals before. What's in this one and what's new?
It is an Israeli proposal. It does not include a permanent ceasefire. It does not include a full withdrawal from the Israeli forces from Gaza, which are the main two demands.
I don't understand this. Those are two direct words that Biden mentioned. Like, are my ears deceiving me? There is like a pretty easy to read infographic that they put forward that had exactly those words on it. I don't
Heads up.
understand.
I'm detecting our
why
sonar
these guys
tech
are
in enemy
saying
hands.
that is not the case. Is there something in the fine print of the proposal that directly contradicts the very clear cut text that declares a permanent cessation of hostility?
Of Hamas.
So what is Hamas's response to this so far?
Hamas said we are responding positively to this proposal. They say that President Biden said that he mentioned permanent ceasefire. He actually mentioned permanent cessation of hostilities. They say that he mentioned.
That's what Israeli media is claiming. That's what Israel actually offered, but Biden's offer includes a permanent end to the hostilities and supposedly with a Moscow in power. Maybe some of the things he said in his speech. Yeah. So what the f is that?